Phi Bua, I'm just looking for you. Aeon called hurriedly. What's wrong? The doctor replied, walking down the hallway, distractedly reading the documents about the chimpanzee bones she was waiting to receive. Can you welcome the new researcher in place of the professor for a moment? The professor is on her way, but she's already arrived before. Oh, really? I didn't even know she was going to arrive today, Bua replied in surprise. The professor just called me. It isn't something official, Aeon explained quickly. No problem then. Just hold this for me, please. Bua handed the documents to Aeon while adjusting her hair, fixing her glasses, and straightening the collar of her shirt, preparing to receive the visitor. Bua had known beforehand that a new researcher would arrive this week, but she hadn't expected to be the one to welcome her, since the professor hadn't given any clear instructions about it. It wasn't something official, but leaving the visitor waiting alone in a room definitely didn't seem like a good idea. How do I look? Bua asked as she ran her hands through her hair, trying to tidy it up. Phi Bua is beautiful as always. Today, you even seem more cheerful than usual. Teenage years are supposed to be the best time of your life. Have fun, Aeon replied with a smile. Which room? The small one, the meeting room upstairs. Okay, I'll go. Aeon, please prepare some water and come later, okay? Yes, Phi Bua. Thank you. You're welcome. Busia headed to the door of the meeting room, which had been prepared to welcome the important visitor. The Research Institute didn't receive distinguished visitors often, and even less so to collaborate on the work. The institute had been in operation for less than 2 years, and there were days when even the local cemetery seemed busier. The research team consisted of less than 10 graduate students under the supervision of professors, and, counting the rest of the staff, the total number of people was no more than 30. Bua raised her right hand and knocked on the door a few times before entering. Excuse me. She caught sight of the visitor, with her back to her, wearing a black suit. Something about her figure seemed strangely familiar. She was looking through the window at the small canal that ran behind the 11-story building of the institute. At that moment, the visitor turned to her. You. Bua could barely finish the sentence, her eyes widening in surprise. Hello, Dr. Busia, the visitor said with a slight smile and a tilt of her head, as if making a joke. We meet again, don't we? And then she walked over to Bua and hugged her. Finya leaned against the edge of the table, leaving a kiss on Bua's cheek, a familiar touch from the night before, while Bua remained with an expression of astonishment. How did you end up here? Bua asked, still being hugged, with Finya resting her forehead on her shoulder and tightening her embrace around her. Someone invited me, and of course, I came, Finya murmured softly against Bua's neck. Tonight, come sleep with me, Boykong. You're crazy. We're at work, and you invite me to spend the night? Busia exclaimed, raising her hand to hit Finya's arm, which made Finya let out a loud squeal and pull away. Soon after, Finya lightly touched Bua's chin with her fingertips and leaned closer. Bye Bua. Hearing her nickname, Bua closed her eyes instinctively, as if she was ready to receive the approaching kiss. Last night. Did I do something that didn't please you? Finya whispered when their lips were a breath away. No, Bua answered briefly, making Finya smile. You made me feel very good. Let's have dinner together tonight, yes? Just then, the sound of a knock on the door caused both of them to quickly move away. Professor. Professor Nasara, in her usual formal attire, entered the room with an expression of relief. Upon learning from Aeon that Busia was receiving the visitor alone in the meeting room, she feared that the two would end up punching each other before she arrived. Bua watched as Finya bowed respectfully to her former advisor before running to hug the 50-something professor who had once signed Finya's resignation letter affectionately. The other student, watching the scene, was completely confused. Are you okay, Professor? Finya asked, after pulling away from the hug. How are you? She asked with a smile. You're still strong and as beautiful as ever, she replied sweetly. You and your idle talk. It's no wonder that both women and men fall in love with you, is it, Finn? Men? Where did you see that? I think they're more women. Finja turned to look at Bua, whose face and gaze behind her square glasses were still a mix of confusion and disbelief. Women, for sure. Hearing this, Bua looked away, pretending not to understand. Thank you for coming, Nisara said, addressing her former student. I'm your student, Professor. All you have to do is ask, and no matter where I am, I'll always come back, Finja replied, taking a step back. Bua, on the other hand, just watched the scene through her glasses, absorbing the words in silence. As she watched, Bua's mind wandered, remembering the last time Finja caused a commotion before resigning. Her former colleague, who was once a close friend, now seemed completely different. In the past, Finja had always bothered her, believing that Bua was the teacher's protégé. Now, however, that didn't seem to matter anymore. Actually, I should have come back a long time ago, Finja muttered. What did the professor say about that? Nisara asked. She didn't say anything, Finja replied, before the director of the institute gestured for her to sit down. Who would dare criticize a student of the Queen of Anthropology like you? As for the report of the 2 years I was away, I will do my best to deliver it as soon as possible. Do it in your own time. We are grateful for your contribution to the institute, Finja. Thanks to you, we were able to obtain support funds from abroad. I am happy to help, Professor, Finja replied calmly. Meanwhile, Bua remained seated, listening to the conversation without making any comments. From now on, you will finally stay in the office and let Bua go out into the field for a while. Both the professor and Finja turned to Bua, who remained motionless, still trying to understand the whole situation. Maybe I have gotten used to working in the field, Bua said, with a slight smile. Oh, Professor, I sent my graduation documents here, as you requested. Perfect, Nisara replied with a nod. Welcome back, Dr. Finja. That night, Bua didn't want to go out to dinner with Finja, but Finja insisted until she couldn't take it anymore. In fact, she ended up getting tired and went, but the dinner that was on the table had barely been touched. Finn. Bua's trembling voice called Finja, her entire body filled with panting breaths, while Finja's fingers moved inside her. They both knew that the night wouldn't end with just dinner. Does it hurt? Finja asked in a soft whisper. And no. I just. Bua's words came out jumbled, and she hugged Finja even tighter with one arm. Finn. I love it when you call me that. Do it more often. Maybe, just maybe, she's starting to fall in love with Dr. Busaya. How many times? Bua murmured. As many as you want. Finn. Ah. Yes. And then, Bua lost it again, for the second time that night. Thank you, she whispered, regaining her senses. Thank you for what? You make me feel good, like I'm unloading something, Bua confessed, her voice soft. If you practice often, you'll get the hang of it, Finja replied with a teasing smile. You mean, practice only with you? Bam! You like violence, do you? Bua exclaimed loudly, surprised by the sudden slap. What do you mean by that? Of course it's only with me, by Bua. Finja retorted in a firm voice, visibly irritated. What if you did this to someone else? Bua asked, defiantly. I don't need to do it to anyone else. I'm already good enough, Finja replied confidently. I didn't know you were so conceited, Dr. Finja. And isn't that true? Or am I wrong? Didn't you like it? Just now, you even thanked me. Do you want the truth, or do you want me to lie? Choose your next words carefully, Boaloy, Finja warned her, her voice carrying a subtle threat, before pausing thoughtfully. I think. I wouldn't want to do this to anyone else. I mean, someone else. Finn, listen to me. Bua raised her face, staring into Finja's deep brown eyes, which shone with an almost childlike innocence. I don't want you to close yourself off to other opportunities, Bua said sincerely. I don't know exactly what to say. I still don't understand these things very well, nor do I know what to do, but I also don't want you to, well, then stay with me longer. Maybe that way, you'll start to understand better, Phineas suggested, still lying naked next to Bua. Or go out and see the world, instead of spending so much time with chimpanzees. She joked, leaning on her elbow. Maybe that was the first truly mature conversation they were having, without fights, without harsh words. Looking at Phineas at that moment, Bua realized that, despite everything, she was charming. Besides, she was finally acting like a civilized person. Maybe it was working. Now that we're so open, there's nothing left to hide, Bua commented with an impassive expression. Don't you think? Phineas didn't answer right away. She just lay there, staring at her, while Bua stared at the ceiling. Slowly, Phineas reached out and placed the back of her fingers on Bua's cheek. What's wrong? Bua asked, turning to her. It's strange. I've never seen you like this. It's because you've never really seen me, Bua replied, her voice containing a slight hesitation. You've always chosen to see what you wanted, and I was never in between. It may be true, Phineas admitted hoarsely. But now, maybe that's changed. Bua wasn't sure what Phineas meant, but she didn't try to interpret her words. Maybe, after the activities, the chemicals released in her brain were making Phineas a little confused, or maybe she was just saying whatever necessary to keep Bua as a bed companion. At least now we're not trying to hit each other over the head with shovels, Bua said, changing the subject and laughing, trying to hide the sudden acceleration of her heart after Phineas's words. Come to think of it, it's funny, don't you think? Before, I thought the professor's favorite was you, Phineas confessed. She always sent me away, while you stayed comfortable at the institute. In the end, we received the same diploma, but I was exhausted, almost without strength. Did you know I was jealous of you? Bua revealed. Why? I was the student who was stuck at the institute, never going anywhere, afraid of not being able to get by. I never saw anything real, while you had already been to so many places, Bua explained. The experience you had is something that can't be compared to. You? Jealous of me, Bua? Phineas asked as she leaned her face closer to Bua. Before she could answer, Bua held her face with one hand, and Phineas lowered her lips, kissing her passionately. After a brief pause, she returned to the kiss. I finally heard that Dr. Busiah is jealous of me. I think my life is really worth living, Phineas said, smiling. I'm serious, Bua reaffirmed. Soon after, Bua felt Phineas put a leg over her body and rest her forehead on her shoulder. Bua responded to the gesture by raising her right hand and placing it on the back of Phineas's neck. She slid her hand gently down her spine, which made Phineas let out a soft moan in response. You say you don't have much practice, but you seem to know exactly what to do to please a woman, Boaloy. I studied the sensory system and movements related to the erect posture of the spine in primates, so I thought it would be useful to apply it here. Otherwise, why would I have studied it? Bua replied, feeling Phineas lower her head and lightly bite her neck. If you want to practice more, just come to me, Boaloy, Phineas said. It's not easy to find someone to teach such specific practices, like the spine aligned with the ground, Bua replied in a low tone. Especially when the instructor has. Her fingers slid down Phineas's arm. A physical structure like yours, which is hard to find. She then placed her hands on Phineas's hips. What kind of physical structure? Phineas asked with a smile. Considering your hips, which align perfectly with your broad shoulders. Bua paused, thinking of the best way to continue, and Phineas laughed, realizing exactly what she was talking about. Not counting the 10 or 20-kilometer walks carrying equipment. Maybe you should thank the professor for providing you with such an attractive structure, Bua teased. I mean, balanced and suitable for perpetuating the species, in the style of the Homo genus. Phineas couldn't handle Bua's words and let out a loud laugh again. You really know how to choose your words so as not to make the conversation sound too suggestive, but honestly, I can't stop thinking about something else, Phinia said, still smiling widely. And I'm the type who believes easily, so okay, I'll believe you. You'd be a great case study, you know? Bua continued. Dr. Bua is always keeping an eye on waistlines, is that it? Don't forget that I'm a physical anthropologist, Bua retorted. It's kind of automatic for me to look at the waistline first, like when we analyze the structure of primates or monkeys and make assumptions about why their populations are decreasing or why some species are extinct. Modern primate females have smaller pelvises that seem less suited for carrying pregnancy, because of the narrower angle. After looking at the pelvis, the next step is... She hesitated, and her face began to blush slightly. Yeah, well... The breast, Phinia finished, knowing exactly what Bua was thinking. Because it has to do with milk production, right? As mammals, we pay a lot of attention to that area first. Stop being perverted, Phinia. I see this as a case study, Bua argued in a serious tone, frowning, clearly not agreeing with the joke. This made Phinia lean in to nibble affectionately on the tip of Bua's nose. I mean, it's a quick and unpretentious glance, but... I end up getting distracted, she admitted, a little embarrassed. If I see you looking at another woman the same way, I'll get back at you, Boaloy, Phinia warned. How absurd, who would look at another person like that? That's invasive. Bua quickly denied. Besides, you're only saying that because you're in bed with me. She added, as if she already knew what the other was thinking. Soon, when you get tired, you'll stop being so possessive, like a territorial animal at the beginning of mating or something. Why do you always turn everything into animal behavior? Humans are primates, they're part of the ecosystem, Bua replied with impeccable logic. I'm starting to go crazy being in bed with a newly graduated woman full of energy like you. So, what do you think about us going to eat something? At dinner, I barely ate anything and then I used up a lot of energy. I already knew that if I gave in and came with you, I wouldn't be able to eat dinner properly. I wouldn't even remember that if you hadn't mentioned it, Bua said as she began to get up from the bed. I'll go find something to eat first. Boaloy, how could you abandon me halfway like this? Phinia exclaimed, indignant.